Welcome to today's webinar, everyone. Today we're going to be talking all about social listening around the COVID-19 crisis. What we're going to go through is a quick introduction, then we're going to dive straight into live social studio, where we're going to be listening in live on what's actually going on, what people are saying. We're going to look at how big it is. How big is it really comparatively, comparing it to big brands like Apple and Google. Where are the conversations? What are the conversations? Is it growing? Is it declining? What are the popular topics? And then zooming in as well into Australia and seeing what people are saying in Australia versus the world. So we're going to cover some really interesting things today, but let's just dive in. So my name's Robin Leonard. For those that don't know me, I'm the CEO and co-founder of AF Digital. I'm 6-time Salesforce certified and in an ongoing learning journey myself. Ex-IBM lead BA and agile project manager, ex-Vodafone CRM business analyst as well. I spent a lot of my career time at Vodafone. And I've got a lot of expertise in social specifically, social listening and social crisis management. This is really how we kind of started our journey with Salesforce, as Radian 6 was the first product that was released in the Marketing Cloud suite. So you can see there's a photo of me. That was maybe 10 years ago, speaking to about 1,000 people at a large media network in the Philippines, and really just exposing them to social data because it's very much a new concept. So yeah, very much my line of expertise. We're also on the partner advisory board for Marketing Cloud partners. So this is a group that meet up once a year in the US, and it's really a board of 12 partners, including some really big brands like Publicis and Deloitte. So we're very honored to be on that board. And as a business, we're a gold consulting partner. We're also a Salesforce org registered partner, and we really across the clouds, sales, service, marketing, community. We're also a Datorama partner and Salesforce.org. We've got a lot of ISV partnerships as well. So where there's little gaps or specific solutions required in Salesforce, there's a lot of different ISV apps out there, so we can help you get set up with those. And really how we help companies is to advise them around the best way to do this digital transformation thing. We help set up the actual transformation. So we do the implementation project, as well as TeamX, which is a hybrid managed service across marketing and technology. And I really want to talk about this brand. Before we go into the actual demo, Stubbies, we relaunched them in 2012 in New Zealand. So we actually brought them back into the foray because they had kind of died out, but we all know and love them as a 70s shorts brand. We used Social Studio back then, or it was then called Radian 6, to listen in when people are talking about cricket, rugby, barbecues, things like that, and we'd engage with them proactively as a brand. And over that campaign, we really reignited Stubbies and made it a cool brand and launched their e-commerce channel. But that was a really great use case for Stubbies because they were just a clothing brand, a workwear brand, they were very associated with the iconic culture of New Zealand and Australia as well. So it's very easy to hone in on those topics like cricket and rugby and associate. More seriously, we have also been working with Meralco, which is the leading energy provider in the Philippines. These guys have a very large customer base across the country. And so we actually specifically worked with them around their social crisis management. And this was about 7 or 8 years ago, where we actually helped them listen for crises because they'd often have typhoons roll through and they'd cause either small focused power outages or major widespread power outages. So we worked closely with them to listen, and it was very early days back then, but we were deriving analytics that would help them predict the magnitude of their social crisis. So this whole topic about crisis management is very much something we've talked about a lot, especially with social. We have a very wide diverse experience across a lot of industries as well. So yeah, this is AF Digital. So let's move in to the live demo. I'm just going to switch across my screens. Great. Okay, so now you're looking at Social Studio. This is the kind of homepage with the workspaces. So Social Studio allows you to run a lot of different workspaces. I've set one up for Corona, and I've got it sitting there. So let's dive straight in. And I've got a few things set up as well. So there's a lot of data in this. So just to give you a background on the tool I'm using, Social Studio, it's got publishing, engagement, and analytics. Today, I'm largely going to be focused on the analytics portion. So it's really focused on social listening, listening out to keywords, and that's really where we're getting almost 500 million mentions of coronavirus in the last 30 days. The way we do that is we set up, these are called topic profiles, but they're really just a grouping of keywords in a structure. And the way I've grouped them allows us to derive metrics around them. So if we have a look into this one, I've got a few Corona ones set up for different use cases. But this is really probably the best structured one where we have keyword groups. So naturally, I'm listening in for Corona and virus, Corona and sick, coronavirus, COVID-19, etc. Removing some things that I feel would be noise, although I think the amount of noise is pretty incomparable, to be honest. We'll see that in a second. And you can see here, I've started to group different topics. So I obviously want to listen for coronavirus as a topic, but I also want to listen for coronavirus and education. So you can see here, I've got keywords like education, kindergarten, professor, schools, etc. Corona, and then it's an and contains corona or coronavirus or COVID-19. You can go for days with adding more variations in keywords, but for the interest of time, I've kept it fairly simple. So you can see here in this analysis, I'm able to really track the volume and the sentiment around each of these things like job losses, quarantine, how is it impacting retail? How do people feel about self-isolation? So that's the background, the kind of cogs behind the scene. So let's just jump straight into an actual dashboard. And as I said, I've preloaded, there's quite a lot of data here. And when I say quite a lot of data, I've never, ever seen this much social data before on any one topic. And let me show you exactly what I mean. So this is picking up 486 mentions in the last 30 days. So March 1st to 31st, we've got a nice round month to look at. 486 million, that's 500 million almost mentions in 30 days. If we look down, and this is where we understand the magnitude, if I also search for Apple and Google, so these are the results for Apple and Google in the last 30 days, 31 million and 17 million. So compared to 486 million, that's a very different number. And I haven't filtered out Apples as well. I haven't been like, oh, it's got to be Apple and iPhone or Apple and iTunes. It's really just apples. Like if someone's talking about an edible apple, we'll consider that. So you can see here, even apples, the fruit, and Apple, the store or the brand, is nothing compared to Corona. And this graph actually shows that. So this is actually showing Apple in orange and Google in green versus coronavirus. You can see a coronavirus is 91%. So let's take away coronavirus, and you can see what this is like. Apple's orange. So Apple's about 64.7% share of voice over Google. But then you throw Corona in, and suddenly they're dwarfed. Like people just are not talking about those things as much as they're talking about Corona. The reason I chose Apple and Google is because they are the #1 and #2 most popular or well-known brands in the world, according to Google. So I thought, okay, that's gotta be comparable, but really it's nothing. It's very interesting. Over to the right, these are our top 50 keywords across the 486 million. So this is, it looks very simple, but really there's a lot of crunching going on behind this. So I'm just going to dive in, and I'm always a bit wary clicking with this much data because it can take a little while to load. So let's just sit on the screen for a little while. I'm also going to, on the right, while that's loading, you can actually filter, you can filter by influencer score. And I find this is a really great way. They added this in, I think, in one of the recent releases, but it's such a game changer because as you're going through this, it's very hard to see what the most important things are. So as we go through, like, let's have a look. And this is global, remember, this is not Australia or any one country. Texas, something's happening in Texas. Briefing, doctors, outbreak, a few hashtags in there. Tested, masks, China, stay home, I think is probably what that relates to. 000, which is emergency in the US. Pandemia, president, fight, medical. Love, I saw love. I thought love was quite a cool word. We've got died, which is quite sad. You know, every one of those mentions must or could potentially be a death or a retweet of a death potentially. So okay, it's taking its time. Okay, great, it has loaded up. So what's what's interesting is you can just click on these things and sort. It's probably going to load again. So I'm going to try not to click too much in this demo, just given the nature of the data. It's a huge amount to crunch. But yeah, so it's indicative, and let's kind of go out of there. So if we go down a little bit, this graph shows our key topics discussed. So remember back to those keyword groups we'd set up where we look at testing, hospital, quarantine, education, sick, etc. So this is showing you the ranking of each of these items, and you can kind of play around with that. And if you look into, say coronavirus as a whole, so these are all mentions of coronavirus, and then these are mentions of coronavirus and these issues. So it kind of gives you a little bit of perspective into what's going on. I can drill into this, and this is really great for analysis. And again, that's probably going to just load. Oh, there we go. I'm going to just try change this guy again. I really like looking at the influencer score because that often shows you the major cause of that data. Because often the things that are most tweeted or retweeted by high influence people are usually the big things that do catch on and get retweeted by other people. And you'll often see that with social media crises, it'll bubble until it is tweeted by a big media agency with a big audience, and that's when it starts to pick up because that person will get retweeted. So you can kind of see here like 17.5% concerned about hospitals, 14.4 around the quarantine, 12.2 around education, 11.6 percent of people talking about being sick or sickness, and these are like symptoms, etc. 7.8% talking about face masks. So I guess if you're a brand and you're looking at the content or the conversations to talk about that are useful and relevant, I mean, this is a good way of kind of getting an insight into, what people think are relevant. This green one is testing, by the way. And you can see here, this is now shown Trump says next 30 days critical, 1 million Americans tested for coronavirus. And that's out 3 minutes ago. So as you can see, it's very much live data. And very exciting. 1 million people in US tested for. So this is really, it sounds like that's the recent announcement overnight from the US. It's very interesting. So let's go down a little bit. This is really one of my favorites. Is a kind of a time trend graph, and you can see here again. If I show the coronavirus alone, these mentions, it's massive. Like you can see here, it's spiking at 27 million on March 13th on Friday. If you look down, you can see these little topics they're picking up as well. So let's take out that noise and let's really see what that was focused on. So there's a bit around testing, sick, hospital. You can see here was a whole spike, and it was a Friday. And I feel like that Friday was one of those big Fridays where everyone was like, "Whoa!" and there were a lot of announcements made. Let's zoom into that a bit more. This is such a great way to analyze social data because you've literally got it represented here in such a great fashion. You know, if I filter out some of these things and really zoom in, I'm going to keep testing and I'm going to keep education and job loss. Okay, so we can see on this March 14th, March 13th was testing spike, March 14th education, March 15th job loss. And that was a Thursday, Friday, Saturday. So some big announcements then. And again, I'm just going to give this guy a crack. Because it's just so interesting. I think what the positive news a little bit, and this is global, remember? So there's a lot of stuff going on in here in each country. If you really drill into it, there'd be a lot of tiny micro spikes that make up this big spike. But the fact is that the world in unison, you know, really had a big uproar at this time is quite amazing. So yeah, and you can kind of see it going along. Let's have a look into so job losses. That has been deteriorating, which is good. It's interesting. It had a bit of a spike. What about quarantine? We can see here around the same time, March 13th, people started talking about quarantine a lot. March 10th was a Tuesday. March 13th, maybe everyone's like, oh, I need to do my shopping. So if we look into March 13th testing, this is last weekend, Mr. Trump was pictured standing shoulder to shoulder with Fabio, who serves as communications chief. He's positive. Philip Jansen tested positive. Justin Trudeau's wife tested positive. London Underground drivers tested positive. I think there were just a lot of announcements, it seems, about people testing positive. Maybe a lot of high-profile people. I think everyone's seen that as well. A lot of high-profile announcements. Australia pacer Kane Richardson. Oh, he tested negative. Good for him. Doesn't have COVID. So very interesting. And you can spend a lot of time on this. You know, you can just really spend time. Let's go back to the dashboard. So the last thing I want to show you on this dashboard, oh, wait, sorry, one more thing is really just where are the conversations happening? You can see 486 million. These are mostly picked up on Twitter. So you can see here 453 million on Twitter and then the rest on everything else. Facebook is a relatively closed channel, so it's fairly limited what we get out of there. There's some stuff on there, but you have to be a public page and all sorts of other criteria. So Facebook's kind of not really in the picture, but you can see there's a huge swell in YouTube, 23 million posts. Forums as well, blogs, 1.3 million. Aggregators, mainstream news as well. I would have thought that would be higher, but I guess that's really, it's from them and, you know, it gets retweeted by the public. Reviews. So these are actually, funnily enough, these are reviews related to Corona because that's what I'm listening for. So that's a very interesting number, is just to be aware of your reviews. Like, are you monitoring them? Are you aware of what's being said about your brand online? What if you had a Corona kind of accusation? Okay, so let's before we move on to the next dashboard, let's talk about sentiment. So this is one of the really interesting findings as I was looking through this is the sentiment for Corona as a brand. If I were to think about Corona in the same way I think about Coke, it is getting 40% negative sentiment overall, 29% neutral, 30% positive. So, and that's probably quite a lot more negative for a brand than you'd expect. So if we look at Apple and Google, so Apple has got about 17%, Google's got about 19% negative. I think there's definitely you'd probably be able to clean that up a lot if you spent time in the keywords, because obviously there'd be bad tasting apples and all sorts of things picked up. So I wouldn't really regard this as an accurate number for Apple, but it's not, it wouldn't be too far off. So that's the thing, is usually brands, healthy brands, have kind of anywhere between 2% and 10 to 15%. 15 is maybe a bit on the high side, negative sentiment. But you have to be very careful about what you consider negative as well. So this is too broad to really reflect these two brands, but it is indicative. So what you can see is that as a brand, Corona is a lot more negative. But this is the big but. If we look at the positive sentiment that's coming out of it, Corona's actually on par with Apple, and I didn't expect this, to be honest. But that is the number of social posts that the Salesforce algorithm consider a positive sentiment. And of course, it's not always right. There's all sorts of considerations with how the sentiment algorithm works, but it's really great for an indicative number. And yeah, that's very interesting. I think it's probably not so much that it's positive about Corona. It's probably that they're positive posts around life with Corona would be my assumption. So, and that's a really interesting thing, is you've got a very polarized topic. So you've got a lot of people, and not polarized in the sense some people are for and against it, but in the sense that there's a lot of good and bad with it. It's up and down. It's hectic, this crisis for many people. So I think there's a lot to focus on with the good as a brand. If you're kind of looking for ways to engage with your customers, is really to focus only on the good. Well, not necessarily only, but just to focus on the good, because there's probably a few conversations in there that are really good to have, and maybe you can help your customers. So just yeah, so I think that's pretty much all I wanted to talk about in relation to the other brands. I think as I went into this, I had a lens of considering Corona as a brand, because that's how I listen to other things. I'm like, okay, think of you like a brand, and you've got products and different topics associated. So it's quite interesting. Let's zoom in now. So zooming in, this is Australia last 30 days. So not quite the same volume, 2.9 million. So a very much tinier amount. This is actually a copy of that same dashboard. So you can see pretty much the same graphs. So I won't go through everything again, but it's just I guess a reminder of what we should be focused on for brands that aren't on Twitter in Australia. I know that there's a lot of people that don't like Twitter out there or don't think there's value in it, but there is a huge volume of data and customers and engagement opportunities that you can take if you choose to. So I really encourage brands to get into Twitter, even though they think it might be dying. It's still very much where the conversation. 2.8 million out of 2.9 million. And these are actionable tweets that you can reply to, you can listen to, you can report on. Yeah, so can't emphasize that enough. Yeah, but I would also, as a brand, just be aware of where the other conversations are happening. Make sure that you are across the news affecting your specific industry, and reviews, especially if there's Corona related. Looking into the key topics, and I actually did the same Apple and Google comparison for Australia to see if it would be the same, and it's even more so. 93.5% is focused on Corona, and then the rest is really Apple and Google. You can see here's some of the top 50 keywords in Australia. So these might be a little bit more relevant, and purely because it's a smaller data set. So, when you're looking globally, you're sharing with all sorts of countries that have their own different trends and things going on. So it's good to have a macro view, but you really need to zoom in to really understand what's happening in a country. Great, so let's have a look at this. So this is Australians, community, that's a good word, home, workers. So I think this might be related to the announcement made last night. No. Um, sorry, I'm just reloading that. Yeah, so I think if you have time, and this is the thing now, we have a bit of time, is there's a lot of value in this. You can just dig into this for a long time and understand what's going on. It's really an opportunity for businesses to try find opportunities here. Great. Okay, cool. Yeah, so let's just have a look into a few of these things. Testing's a really big topic at the moment, simply because it's hard to control the coronavirus without testing. So we've got New South Wales Health is ramping up coronavirus testing in Sydney's wealthy eastern suburbs due to Bondi backpackers. It's quite interesting. Yeah, testing for coronavirus and treatment needs to be free, period. There's some very interesting things out there. So I think there's a lot of opportunities. This whole stay home thing is also a really great content opportunity for businesses if you are looking to kind of talk about something, things you can do to stay at home, being responsible, how to win, how to quarantine win is what my business partner Pauline says all the time. So great, let's zoom out of that a little bit. So I won't spend too much time on Australia as a whole. You can see it's got fairly similar sentiment results. The keyword topics are, testing is number one, education number two. There's a lot of people with kids out there and jobs. Quarantine is largely impacting Australia. And actually, let's just zoom in a little bit on this graph, because this graph shows the same thing as these graphs. So I'm just gonna let's look at quarantine. Okay. So job losses, I think last Thursday, there was a bit of a spike there. Saturday, March 14th, that's quite interesting. Monday and Tuesday at the start of the week, there were a lot of posts around job losses. And you can see quarantine really stuck in around March 13th. It seemed like that was really a big time, March 13th. And in yellow, we've got self-isolation. A lot of people really felt it on the Tuesday if they hadn't been to work in a day or so. Self-isolation is key to reducing COVID-19 cases. ABC, Guardian. Yeah, so you can see there's a lot of the media are talking about these trends, and these drive a lot of the conversations. Great. So moving down, so this is a little bit different to the global. We've actually drilled in a bit. And so you can see here are some of the top issues. So you've got testing here, which is one of the top issues, 148,000 posts in Australia in the last 30 days. And again, you can see a lot of them are on Twitter, some mainstream news. And this is the word cloud. So this is specifically around testing. And you can see Bondi is quite a big one there. News, health. Trump is also talked a lot about here. Pop-up, if that's about pop-up testing. Positive, so positive meaning a positive test result, which is quite sad, I guess, if anyone talks about that. Looking at the sentiment, and this is another great way to view that topic. So we're really looking at the topic of testing and what's the sentiment over time. So you can see March 1st to March 13th, we've got the spike of negative, and I can take out all of the others, and that's really there. Great thing is I can drill into this as well, and let's just have a dig in and see what it says here. And just to remind you, this is all relatively off the plan. This is all live data. Breaking Home Affairs Minister Peter Dutton has tested. Okay, that was 18 days ago. Oh, yeah, so that was March 13th. That was correct. So that's when Peter Dutton got it. So I think that was a really big scare or a big trend in Australia was when a senior MP got it. And I think there was also talk of him being in touch with the PM, etc. Canadian Prime Minister also has tested positive. So we get some global news announcements in the Australian feeds as well. Um, yeah, March 19th. What was that? A guard working in a temporary detention facility has tested positive. So I think there has been a lot of talk about prisons as well, with how they're dealing with that. 35 people linked to a wedding south of Sydney have tested positive for coronavirus. Okay, very interesting. So let's dive out of this. I've done the same thing for education. Education is a very hot topic because it affects so many people, and we're really looking into students, schools, professors, and you can see here online is becoming a thing. I think this is one of the really great parts of this whole coronavirus is this whole learning remotely thing is also becoming a possibility. All of these universities and schools are being forced to go online fairly immediately. So yeah, quite interesting. Face masks is also a very hot topic with PPE, personal protection equipment, ventilators, masks. I think there's a massive kind of human rights issue with doctors and nurses not having the protective equipment to deal with their patients. And then they go home and they have to, see their family. And you hear these stories about doctors that are going home and sleeping in tents outside because they don't want to put their family at risk. It's very troublesome. And then job losses, you can see here. This is also pretty dramatic. We've got a couple of big red spikes, 23rd, 24th. Let's zoom into these guys. If I show the neutral, yeah, it's not really so much. Yeah, and this is probably one of the most dramatic parts of this coronavirus. I mean, aside from the health impact, is the economic impact. And people's livelihoods are really put at risk, and the way they express themselves. If you think about social media as just being a very unadulterated expression of a large group of human beings, and that's really what it is. You could almost say it's a sample size of the wider population. So if you've got 1,098 people that are tweeting about this, you can expect there to be another, 100 of those, 100 times that number that are feeling it but haven't tweeted. So it's really great as an indicator. If I look here on March 14th, Telstra map to visualization, thousands of distressed new jobless. Oh, wow, that's dramatic. Yeah, so yeah, it's very interesting. Up to 2 million Australians could find themselves unemployed in the coming months. In a time of such doom and gloom, mass layoffs. Yeah, so I mean, pretty unhappy news, really. Nothing too good here, but I think as you kind of go in, you can see a lot of it is media related. Like there's kind of an impact, and then the media will pick it up. Huge crowds swarmed Centrelink today. I think we all remember that day. Yeah, so yeah, I think that was probably with that Centrelink rampage. Thursday, 19th of March. Unemployment in New South Wales edged higher in February as the coronavirus-induced crisis began to hit the economy. Yeah, so again, unemployment related. Let's dive in. What's happy? Happy news on March 26th. And I haven't gone through and checked the sentiment. Sentiment's not always 100% because of double negatives and sarcasm and things like that. Fears, okay. A reminder that the welfare state is not a burden, but a form of collective insurance against life's hazards. I'm not sure what that means. There is some good news for those put out of work by coronavirus. One of our major retailers is hiring. Great, that's awesome. So that's really good news. Um, not so happy. Yeah, so I mean, it's probably a little bit hard for it to read the positive sentiment, but it may be that people are adding spins on some of these things, or Yeah, I think uh, this is maybe positive. Yeah, it's very hard. And it's hard for even humans to understand what's positive and negative. So if you put a human down and got them to tag these as positive and negative, you also have a lot of error as well. So yeah, what you can do though is you can train Social Studio with specific keywords. So yeah, very interesting around the sentiment and the trends of the different topics. Let's just have a dive in. So that's looking at it from a 48 hour, sorry, a 30-day perspective. If we look at it from a 48-hour perspective, and this is a kind of macro to micro, right? We've looked at the whole month, 122,000 mentions in the last 48 hours, literally. We can see here, this is the overall trend. 4 a.m., you've got Australians, most Australians are in bed. So that's the low. And then it really picks up at around 7 a.m. It starts kind of 6 a.m., 7 a.m. People start waking up, tweeting, going, what's going on? Tweet, 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 tweet. They check their Twitter, maybe retweet a bunch of media pages, and then all day, 1 p.m. has a little spike there, 3 p.m. another one, back 9 p.m. people come back and have a final tweet and then go to bed and then up at it the next day. And this is actually literally 11 a.m. today. So it's already had its little spike at 9 a.m. Let's see what the day has ahead of us. Let's look at these individual conversations. So we looked at these conversations from a month perspective. Now you can start to see a little bit more detail. So I'm just going to take these out. Job loss. I'm really interested in the job loss conversation just because it's really at the heart of everything. If people lose their jobs, that's really the whole instability of society. So this for me is a very important issue. And you can see here, 4 p.m. Let's just drill into this, see what's currently going on. Again, I'm going to look for influencer. The reason I don't go for received date is there's a lot of noise as well, and I don't want to scroll through a lot of stuff that's irrelevant. And I know the high authority ones are usually the biggest ones. Prime Minister Scott Morrison. So this happened at 4 p.m. yesterday. Has pledged 130 billion over the next 6 months to help Australians who have found themselves out of work during the coronavirus. Great. Wage subsidy is great news. So obviously that's where the wage subsidy picked up, and it's probably just been a kind of conversation since then, and then it'll probably pick up again. It'll be interesting to see where it goes. Like what's 9 a.m. today look like for the influencers? Top hospital exec Laura said Trump supporters, blah, blah, not relevant. While Morrison's wage subsidy is welcome, it seems unlikely to help higher education workers who make a crucial contribution to the fight against COVID-19. Bye, honey. I hope you enjoy your self-inflicted quarantine. Oh, okay, that was mean. Sorry, didn't want to read that one out. No, they're not always nice. Uh, Top hospital. So it seems like there's a lot of rhetoric around how is it interpreted? What does it mean for my business? I've got my own questions. I'm like, what does it mean for me? What if I don't make 30% losses in income? Does it mean I don't get this? Which I think the answer is yes. Uh, if we're facing 15 to 20% unemployment after COVID-19, then we need some big projects to get the economy going again. Agreed. How about we develop a renewable energy industry? Okay. Yeah, so I mean, it's really to be analyzed. So, oh, I have navigated out. So that's that dashboard. So one final part of Social Studio I want to show you is the workbenches. So this is really where you can do big data analytics without having any kind of big data technical skill set. It's very simple. Again, it's a big data set, and it's the biggest data set I've ever used in Social Studio, so it's pretty big. I'm not just going to click around willy-nilly, but what I have done is it's filtered by 30 days, and it's filtered to English only. So remember I had 480 million. There was a lot of non-English, so I can't really use that stuff on this call today, so I filtered it out. But you can see here, that's should be the same word cloud as the previous dashboard. If we kind of go down, you can see here are all the top hashtags. So if you want to know what's the top hashtag in the world for coronavirus, it's hashtag COVID-19, followed by hashtag coronavirus, followed by hashtag stop airing Trump. um, so that's quite funny. And then stay home, COVID_19, COVID, coronavirus truth, National Doctors Day, Texas politics. Yeah, so some interesting things coming in. In terms of demographics, out of that 281 million, the biggest group is 35 to 44 years old. Second biggest, 25 to 34. The least is 18 to 20, although they only have 2 years in there, 3 years. 21 to 40, kind of down the bottom, and 65 plus. These guys don't get on Twitter, so that's probably why that's so low. I'm sure they're all like saying stuff in their communities. The 21 to 24 and 18 to 20 is surprising because they, and I think, I don't know if you could assume it's relative to some of the things that are being said around the world about, they really need to get inside. 55 to 64 is a big group that's very active in this conversation. 45 to 54. So, and that's quite an interesting group to have active online in any topic, 55 to 64 in an online conversation. So that's quite a peculiar one that you'd want to look at. Also, just looking at the gender, female to male, 142, 130. Yeah, so fairly even. I mean, you couldn't really draw too much from that, I don't think. Data set. So these are the countries, and I am gonna drill into this guy. So this is showing each of the countries and what's their volume out of those many 280 millions. So we've got US 113 at the top, and unknown. So US and unknown are kind of outliers. It's really because of the Facebook API. So all Facebook posts come in as US, as well as all Twitter-based US and all other US-based products, but all Facebook comes in as US. I don't think that's going to impact us too much. We didn't have that much Facebook volume. The unknown is from Instagram and potentially other unknown sources, but mostly from Instagram. And the reason Instagram doesn't come through is because it's just not in the API, that country field. So that's why it's just unknown. But then the rest are known. So those are the two funky ones, just because of the APIs available. Then we've got UK, massive group of people talking about this. I think we've all seen the news that they are, very dramatically affected. India as well has over 1 billion people in lockdown. Canada also, Nigeria, which is worrisome. Emerging countries. When there's a lot going on there, we all have to very much worry because they don't have the the infrastructure to deal with this kind of thing. I mean, let alone to any other country, really. Australia is 1% of all of the global mentions, so which is quite interesting. It's still a fair number, 2.7 million. Malaysia next, South Africa, Philippines, Indonesia, Ireland, Pakistan. That's so Philippines, even South Africa, Philippines, Indonesia, Pakistan, not good countries to have a big outbreak in. France, obviously, we see that. Strangely, we haven't seen Italy yet. Kenya, Brazil, Germany, Spain, China is down here. We don't really get a lot of Chinese social network mentions. So I mean, this is still actually quite a lot. There'd be a huge number more that are behind this wall. Ghana, almost 1 million mentions in Ghana. That's quite sad. Thailand, there's Italy down here, 0.2%. It's quite low comparatively. Singapore, Thailand, Portugal, New Zealand, my country, 0.1%. Let's keep it low, guys. You can do it. Stay home. All right, so that's the countries. And if I kind of look into this trend curve, and let's just zoom into this one. So this is also showing the trend over time with country growth. You can see here there's nothing from March 1st to March 10th, and it's just because I set up this topic profile recently, and it starts polling from a certain time on certain metadata. So just kind of ignore this side, that's just not available. But we're looking from this date onwards, March 11th. But we can see by country. I'm just going to remove US and unknown. So we can then see the growth. So you can see Canada really grew up to a spike. I'm going to change this. UK has also spiked on March 13th. Oh, we saw March 13th was a big day, right? We've been talking about it all through this webinar. Australia spiked, India as well. What other countries have we got? Let's look at France and Spain. Okay, Spain's not too bad. Singapore, Thailand. Okay, not too bad. Italy. Okay, not too bad. And you can see it's declining as well. I mean, it's hard to read too much into that decline, but it does appear to be declining. New Zealand, yes, very low. UAE, Korea also very low. But it does bring into perspective where these countries are, because these countries are relatively low, or Spain is probably a bigger problem. Yeah, so, but then you've got these countries like Canada, UK, India, a lot of people in India, and you can see this India trend is just really growing. You know, it's just getting bigger, but then it's dropped a little bit. So it seemed to have its spike. What I'd be very interested to cross-analyze is this the comparison between the social media volume and the number of cases. That would be a very interesting graph to overlay onto this, because I imagine there'd be a follow-on effect. So that's countries, and you know, once you're in here as well, it's really great because you can then go in and say, I want to remove, again, I'll remove UK and US, and then I want to look into India at the spike. And then I want to look at the hashtags in India. Okay, let's also look at the sentiment. Are they happy? And while we're there, let's also look at top words so we can understand what's really going on. So hopefully that won't crunch for too long. But again, this is a really extraordinarily large data set. We might just let that sit there for a little bit. Might go up a little bit and see. I wonder what the youth are talking about versus. There's not a big sample size there. I'll do this one. Let's have a look at the hashtags of the 21 to 24s and the 55 to 64s. See how they're different. Great. So we've got this this sentiment from India. So we can see here it's pretty relative, except that we've got a much higher positive number. So remember we had 30% before. So India has got much higher positive number. Although again, you'd probably want to spend a bit of time rationalizing that positive, and you can do that with just keyword optimization and also training the sentiment algorithm. But this is an interesting number. I would be curious to find out what that means. If we also look into that same date, so this is March 22nd. Again, it's that spike up. Oh, okay, it's this one. I just clicked on the wrong one. But you can see here they're happy again. And you can drill into this. And this is really a great way to understand what's going on in any country very quickly. You know, you can quickly see here, and if you kind of zoom into workers, we could probably get a pretty good idea about what's going on. So stockpiling, virus likely to hit Indian steel makers. Yeah, so you can see a lot of these are actually websites and forums. A lot of these guys as well. Hopefully this top words loads soon. Yeah, there we go. Okay, great. So we've got a lockdown, gratitude, maybe there's some positive sentiment coming from those kind of keywords. Outbreak, there's some hashtag here that's pretty popular as well. Gigantic curfew, yeah, it's pretty interesting. Gratitude, I wonder what people are saying about gratitude. So people are taking this one day as work done after paying gratitude to our corona fighters. I think that that is a common thread actually, is that there is a lot of positive gratitude towards the people on the front line. You know, my brother is a doctor and he's very much gone to war for his country. That's how I feel about it. I'm very proud of him. So going back up, let's look at these hashtags before we kind of wrap this up. So 21 to 24, COVID-19. So the obvious ones, stay home, good, good. That's a good third biggest. Coronavirus truth, maybe a conspiracy theory. Hashtag do, not sure what that is. Interesting. Flatten the curve. So there's some kind of intent, some good intent. The oldies, the 55 to 64, and apologies for anyone that takes offense to that. Stop airing Trump. You don't want to hear it anymore. Hydroxyl chloroquine. I wonder what that is related to. I think that may be related to hand sanitizer, actually. So maybe that's how to make your own hand sanitizer. My mum sent me how to make my own hand sanitizer as well, or my auntie, I think. So there you go. National Doctors Day, Trump. Yeah, so very interesting. There's so much to discover in here. So just to wrap this up, I'm just going to jump across and give some quick tips on how to actually listen for your brand. So I'm just going to swap over the screens. Great. All right, so if you have Social Studio or if you're looking to get it, this is really what I would recommend that you do to get set up for Corona listening. And it's really as simple as listening for the coronavirus keywords and listening for your own brand, and then excluding bear at the bottom. So this way, you will find out if anyone talks about your brand in relation to coronavirus. That's such an important thing to track because you may have cases of your employees, you know, and you want to definitely be at the forefront. So if you set this topic profile up and then build a shared dashboard that's an awesome dashboard similar to the ones I showed you today that are just a go-to dashboard for most things you need to know. Then set up publishing and tracking. So setting up publishing, you can actually use macros to track, publish labels to track your Corona-related posts, and then you can report on those as a standalone item. So you can kind of track impressions, clicks, etc. That would be a really good strategy around your content kind of themes. Then you'd set up engagement. So just keeping in mind that you should definitely be engaging with people on your pages. If they message you, you should be replying. Like that's a no-brainer. But what you should also do is be prepared to proactively engage on the wider social internet. So this means listening in for relevant conversations that your brand can then jump into and engage with. So remember I talked about Stubbies, the brand we listen in for cricket and bear and rugby. Those were relevant conversations for my brand to proactively engage with. So really thinking about how you're going to proactively engage with your community on social media. Then do a real-time post report. Salesforce has a great feature where you can just do a real-time post report. If anyone tweets Corona and AF Digital, I get an email immediately, well, within 10 minutes or so, that says, here was a tweet that someone just said. So you can set that up so you can have a really great handle on everything that's going out. And this works for your brand's posts. So if you're publishing out there and you want to be aware of what your marketing team are doing, you can have this set up. But it also works for public posts, people that are talking about you but not to you. So that's really powerful. And finally, just that dashboard that we set up, point number 2, you can automate this to be sent to your email every week as a PDF. So it's as simple as that. You just set it up. You can send it to yourself and to your other crisis stakeholders. So they're also informed about everything that's going on with the brand. And finally, for healthcare providers, there is a social studio 3-month free package. If you talk to your Salesforce account executive, again, it's only for healthcare industry. So, and the intent is really so they can listen in for COVID-related responses. If this is you, then we can help you set this up and get you started at no cost.